Coming up, Matthew Judon throws a hissy fit at practice, which shows just how far the Patriots have fallen. Mike Felger doesn't think Craig Breslow, World Series champion, is a baseball guy. And we're looking at the bleakest franchises in sports right now. All that and more on the Cam Show, powered by Rogue Media Sports Network, right now. It is the Cam Show, powered by Rogue Media Sports Network, as we take this show on the road. And been no shortage of Boston sports news this week, especially around the Patriots, which at this time, we've known this the last 20 years. This is when the lightning rod comes up. That is Patriots training camp. We stop caring about the Red Sox for about a month or two until they get to the postseason on those years that they do. And it's all about the Patriots. And this week, it has been all about Matthew Judon, the now disgruntled star of the Patriots team. Obviously, still, you could argue, the best player that they have. The defensive end linebacker, who is a pass rush specialist, who has been terrific in his 3 years with the Patriots. Dips off towards the end of seasons, sure, but has still been one of the most productive pass rushers in the league. Coming off a big injury last year, he is looking for a new contract. Didn't call it a holdout. He might call it one now because it has been a tough week for Matthew Judon. In fact, I was at Patriots training camp last week when he was playing catch with the fans. He actually threw one to me. I felt like a little kid. But in that time, people were asking him about his contract, and he said, "You got to ask Elliot Wolf. Get Elliot Wolf out here. Get Elliot out here to talk to you." And I was like, this is kind of interesting. This is kind of funny. This is not something you would have ever seen under Belichick, a player playing catch with the fans and complaining about the GM to them right in front of them, right in front of cameras and everything. That was odd. And then, earlier this week, he has a few words with Gerard Mayo and sulks off, kicked out of practice. The whole week last week, we were saying, is he upset? Yeah, a little bit, but disgruntled's a tough word. Disgruntled is what we would say about CeeDee Lamb down in Dallas, not Matthew Judon. My dude is whole ass disgruntled now because now he sits out of practice. Now we could call this a holdout. And what I think is even bigger than the whole Judon, this contract situation and what has transpired at practice this week is what has happened to our New England Patriots. This is not what I was raised on. Not this team, not what I'm seeing right now on or off the field. And Matthew Judon is someone who has been an enthusiastic Patriot the last few years. He says he wants to resign because he wants to retire as a Patriot. And the way he's played and the way he's carried himself the last few years has actually proven that. He's trying to get players to come and play here. He seems to really, really like it. He's been embraced by the fans as a player and really as a guy off the field as well. The last few years, I've loved Matthew Judon. And to the point where I'm like, man, I wish he could have been here when things were actually going well, when we had good teams. Like, I would love for Matthew Judon to be a guy who wins a Super Bowl with the Patriots. That's not going to happen. They're not going to win the Super Bowl anytime soon. And now this is like, it feels like we're just like any other team in the league. Because you got a guy out there who is playing catch with the fans, telling them, yeah, go ask the GM, bring him out here as to why I don't have a new contract. And throwing a hissy fit at practice and sulking off the field, throwing his pads down and walking off the field. This stinks. And I get that Judon has a gripe because they've re-signed a couple of other pieces from the team last year. Guys like, Kyle Duggar, Ramondre Stevenson, Jabril Peppers, the most recent one, which came at the end of last week and probably had something to do with the temperature getting raised a little bit for Matthew Judon. He's pissed. They don't have a deal done. But to do that, that's just all the things wrong with the Patriots right now. Because first off, Matthew Judon's supposed to be one of, if not your team leader, right? Like, this is a guy who's played in the league for years, been an ultra productive player, gets a lot of money from the Patriots, and again, seems to be an enthusiastic Patriot. And you've got a guy coming in as a first-year head coach who's only been on the staff a few years, obviously a player for a long time, and he's trying to earn some respect amongst his team. And you show up your coach like that in the second week of camp, but as guys are barely getting their pads on, that's not leadership to me. And honestly, if you're going to hold out, hold out. But don't come to practice for a couple of days and then throw a fit like that and make the whole team look bad. That to me is worse than just saying I'm not practicing until I have a contract. I think that's worse. And especially because of what it does to your head coach. I mean, everyone now has it on camera, the head coach coming to talk to you and then you throwing a hissy fit and storming off the field. To me, that's not leadership. And to me, that's not the Patriots. I was raised on a Patriots team that was ignore the noise. No man is any better than the team. No man is any better than anyone else. Anyone's job is up for grabs if you don't work your ass off and do things right. And that's not what we're seeing right now. It's a sluggish start to camp. All the reporters have talked about how bad the offense has looked, how lackadaisical some players have looked. And I was at practice. There wasn't the juice there. It wasn't as crisp. There weren't guys getting chewed out. There weren't guys taking laps. I understand that there's some of that this week. It's just not the same. It's not the same. This team um, is it just feels so far behind where it should be. What we saw all those years, and I get that that was the best dynasty we've ever seen in the NFL, but they look far behind what a contending team should look like in the first week of practice. Nothing looks in sync. Nothing looks impressive, and you've got guys who are supposed to be leaders of your team storming off the field in the middle of practice, showing up their new head coach. And it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. I don't think that's too wild a word to use. As someone who grew up with the Patriots being the model of what a team is supposed to look like in any facet of life, do your job, ignore the noise, next play, next man up, all about the benefit of the team. You can use that in all parts of your life. This is not it. And this is going to be a bad football team. We know that. But to have the bad habits as well, then you've got an even longer road, more uphill of a battle to fight. And you would think that at least you've got some good veteran guys in there. You don't have Matthew Slater anymore. You don't have Devin McCourty anymore. The old guard is gone. But you've got guys like Jabril Peppers. You've got guys like, David Andrews. You've got guys like Matthew Judon. Cross one of them off. And I hope Judon stays. I think he's got some productive football left in him. But, they were throwing around trade scenarios where you can get a day 2 pick for Matthew Judon. I don't know how you'd say no to that right now. And especially after an incident like this, I really don't know how you say no. So, yeah, we expect better out of Matthew Judon for a reason, because he's a hell of a player and he seemed to be a great leader. But that's not the case right now. And this is not your slightly older brother's New England Patriots. Not anymore. Not anymore. This feels like kind of where the dynasty has died, um, without even a Belichick direction. We'll see. Mike Felger doesn't think that the guy who played 13 years in the major leagues is a baseball guy, which is great. He and Tony from Peabody, simpatico. And we're looking at the bleakest franchises in each sport right now. All that and more on The Cam Show, brought to you by Rogue Media Sports Network. Cam Show, brought to you by Rogue Media Sports Network. It is the trade deadline extravaganza review time for how the Red Sox treated their July 30th and how they made this team better. And let me say this, they did make the team better. Did they make a big splash? Of course not. But they made the team better. And I think the reaction among Red Sox fans and Red Sox media has really proven a greater point of how far this team has fallen in terms of the zeitgeist in the city and the genuine interest around the Red Sox and how it has dissipated over the last 5 or 6 years compared to what the excitement is like for the Patriots, for what's going to be a very bad team, for the Celtics coming off a championship, and even the Bruins. I think the way the media has reacted to this Red Sox trade deadline has told you a lot of what you need to know. Because a lot of people out there are saying, why didn't they make the big splash? Why didn't they go out there and get Renifo or the starter from the White Sox? And why didn't they go out and get this guy? I know you've got a team that could make the playoffs this year, but if you look at this team and you say, I've got my best farm system I've had in almost a decade here. I'm going to trade one, if not more, of my top 6 guys to go out and get Luis Renjifo, then you're the problem. Then you are the problem. And I know it hasn't been exciting the last couple of years, and I was one of the ones who said they needed to do more in the offseason, that they didn't spend enough. The fact that they had to go out and trade for a DFA James Paxton when they could have just picked up his option last year, yes, that goes for it. I mean, Nathan Eovaldi was a name that was on there. That was a guy you had the chance to re-sign a year and a half ago. Justin Turner was a name that was linked to the Red Sox. He eventually goes to Seattle. That was a guy whose option you could have picked up in the offseason. I had plenty of problems with that. I don't have problems with this trade deadline. I don't know what you wanted them to go out there and get. But apparently, some, specifically at 98.5, the Sports Hub, wanted them to go out there and make some big deal. For whom? I don't know, just a big deal, because Texas kind of did that.
Texas won the World Series last year. Who'd they go get? They got Seager.
Right.
That was a big name. It wasn't last year, but they got him. Who'd they get at the deadline? Was it Scherzer or one of those Mets pitchers? They still went out and were aggressive. They had a team that was in contention. They added a big name, a splashy move, and it worked for them. It still works, even though there are so many more nerds in the front office.
Yeah, you got all of that wrong. They signed Corey Seager as a free agent 2 off seasons before that. So I don't know why you mentioned that name first. Has nothing to do with the trade deadline and the big splash. They signed him as a free agent in the winter before the 2022 season. So don't know where that's coming from. They did go out and get Max Scherzer, and he started 8 games for them, and he couldn't give them 5 innings in a game in the postseason. They also went out and they got Aroldis Chapman, who they traded their number 1 pitching prospect for. They got a half a season out of Aroldis Chapman, who gave you just about what Craig Kimbrell gave you in the 2018 postseason. Was shaky the whole time. You still won the World Series, so who cares? But that kid's going to be an ace for Pittsburgh. So yes, they did go out there and make some moves. It didn't really bolster their team all that much. They bolstered their team before that. They went out and got Nathan Eovaldi before that in the offseason. They signed Marcus Semien and Corey Seager to big-time deals. And the deal that they did make at the trade deadline, which was not a huge splash that they didn't even mention, was the one guy who was pivotal for them, and that's Jordan Montgomery. And if the Red Sox made a deal like that, like the one that the Rangers made for Jordan Montgomery, we'd be saying, why didn't they go out there and make a big splash? So that's just pure lunacy. That's just an idiot trying to make a take and throwing it out there and just getting all of the facts wrong. They didn't go out there and make a big splash. They went out and got some guys that could bolster the team that they have now without touching any of their top 20 prospects. No one in the top 20. So you say, oh, you traded Nick York for a project and the starting pitcher from Pittsburgh. Yes, you traded a first-round pick in Nick York for a first-round pick in Priester. He's a project. He's got some great upside. So does Nick York. You were done with the Nick York experience. You didn't know where you were going to put him. He has good numbers at AAA, but he didn't make the majors because you didn't have a spot for him in the majors for a team with all these holes. That's okay. You can get rid of Nick York. Maybe you could have got something a little bit better, but probably not. He was the number 20 prospect in your system. So what were you expecting to get out of him? Pittsburgh likes seeing those numbers in AAA, and you go and get someone that you might be able to use in your rotation as early as next year. Good, because you weren't going to have Nick York in your lineup as soon as next year. You just weren't. So that's a good, sound deal by Craig Breslow, who brought in a couple of guys. Lucas Sims from Cincinnati, very potent middle of the bullpen guy. His numbers aren't terrific. His FIP's not great. His homers per nine is not great, but that's what you're looking at this time of year. You got Danny Jansen, who maybe you can get a good half a season out of him. You take a flyer on him. All this comes back to guys who can play at the major league level outside of Priester, who you got without trading any of your big prospects. And for me, I think that's a good move for the Red Sox. When you get two bullpen arms who pitched at the major league level this year and were effective at times, you have those guys slotted in there until your real relievers like Martin and Slayton come back, and then you're in business. But apparently Craig Breslow's business has not been enough for some, because, well, I'll just let Mike Felger and Tony from Peabody tell you why Craig Breslow is not doing a good enough job.
Yeah.
Tony and Peabody. Hi, Tony.
Hi, guys. Great show. My beef with the Red Sox is basically they gave away 4 or 5 games after the All-Star break because they had no 7th or 8th inning pitchers. If that was Dave Dombrowski, a real baseball guy, he would have run out the next day and got 1 or 2 relief pitchers that could have helped them until, temporarily until the 2 big guys came back. And, this guy, Craig Breslow, he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He's not a baseball guy. Those are key games that they lost after the All-Star break. They lost 2 out of the 3 to the Dodgers, 1 to Colorado, and at least 1 to the Yankees. That's 4 games. If they had half-decent 7th or 8th inning guys, they could have won those games, Mike.
Okay, Tony, I agree. And I agree Breslow's not a baseball guy. I agree. He's another modern analyst. It's all that he is.
He played in the league, though.
I don't consider him a baseball guy. I don't. I think, they promote that he played, but does he sound like a ball player to you?
No.
No. Does he talk like a ball player? No. So it's like, what does it matter? I don't think he thinks like one.
What are you talking about? What? Craig Breslow isn't a baseball guy? The guy who played 13 years in the major leagues is not a baseball guy? What the fuck are you talking about, Mike? He's not a baseball guy because Mike Felger doesn't think he sounds like one or acts like one? Okay, so what if they had Kevin Millar in there instead? You'd be A-okay with his moves because he's a baseball guy? What are we fucking doing, man? How much more baseball do you need to be than to play 13 years in the major leagues to win a World Series with the team that you are the GM for right now? If you don't think he's a good GM, that's one thing. But to say he's not a baseball guy is certifiably fucking insane. It's nuts. It's completely gusto. What are you talking about? He doesn't sound like one because he went to Yale? I don't know what to tell you. And who gives a shit if they are a baseball guy? The best GM in the history of this team didn't pick up a bat past probably fucking JV. His name was Theo Epstein. And he had the same philosophy as the guy in line right now. So what are we talking about? Oh, he sounds like a nerd. Yeah, Theo was a fucking nerd. And they won 2 World Series with him. He turned the franchise around. Dave Dombrowski is also a nerd, by the way. They know what fit means. I know you don't, Mike. And that's fine, but you don't get to tell me who's a baseball guy and who isn't, especially one who has a pension from Major League Baseball. Give me a fucking break with this. The Red Sox trade deadline was fine. It was fine. It was not earth-shattering. This is a team that when they're healthy, as we've seen this year, when they're healthy, should probably be a playoff team anyway. I know we weren't expecting that going into this season, but how about we give Craig Breslow a bit of a chance here? Because again, I don't like how they handled this offseason either. But with this ownership group hamstringing their GMs the last 5-6 years, let's at least give him a couple off seasons to see what he can do. This was not the July to say, let's go out there and get the best starter on the market on July 30th. This was not the time for that. So how about we let them potentially get to a postseason and then work from there? Huh? Not a baseball guy. That's like saying Felger's not a sports radio guy because you don't like the way he sounds. what the fuck are we talking about? But this all goes to show, this whole media reaction goes to show how far the Red Sox have fallen in the public eye in Boston. And that's sad. It's sad, but I'm a victim of it. You know, I don't watch 150 games like I used to. I probably watch 100. But the fact that this is the reaction is like, why don't we sign somebody we know that I don't have to Google? Oh, I also don't watch baseball ever. So why don't we get a guy that I know, even though I don't watch the fucking sport? That's like saying, why don't we get a gymnast that I know? I only know Simone Biles, but why don't we get someone that we've actually heard of? Oh, God, it's just brain dead stupidity. Having a take for the sake of having a take. Craig Breslow isn't a baseball guy, has a World Series ring, and he's not a baseball guy. Oh, give me a fucking break. Braden and I, here on the Cam Show, Rogue Media Sports Network, Braden and I wanted to put our brains together for something. That's typically something we struggle to find. What could our brain power be used for? And so today I wanted to look at the most pathetic sports franchises right now, which that's key. You know, it could be a little bit different from, you know, all time most pathetic. Right now is what we're looking at, most pathetic. And we're doing people do top fours. We've done top threes before, or excuse me, top fives, top threes before. We're going to do a top four, which means we're going to take one from each of the four major sports. Braden, do you have a sport you want to start with?
I guess football.
Football. Would you like to start us off? Please.
Sure. I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers.
Oh, damn, you took mine.
Well, I think that's the obvious choice here, right?
That's the obvious choice. Yeah.
I mean, they made the Super Bowl in 2015-2016 season.
Mm-hmm. In 2003. Yeah.
Yeah, and they lost to the Patriots that year.
They did. In
Houston.
Yes.
That's the Janet Jackson.
H-time, whole time.
That's the Janet Jackson nip slip.
Yes, that is. That's combining your hometown and a huge music event. That's big for you. Yeah, they're pretty bad.
They've just been downhill since that loss. That loss plummeted their trajectory.
The Denver one, you mean?
Yeah, Super Bowl 50
with Cam Newton. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it felt like everything kind of went perfect for them that year. 15-1,
Mm-hmm.
like pretty dominant. Like you know, if they win that game, we're talking about them as one of the best teams ever.
Right.
And you don't even remember it like that the way you do like the 07 Patriots, because in this game, the Panthers didn't really feel close at any point. They lost, I think it was 24-10, dud of a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Newton does nothing. That Broncos defense is obviously generationally good. And we just kind of don't remember them. And what I think is an important part of this too, Braden, this whole list, is how many Panthers fans do you know?
I don't think I know any Panthers fans.
Yeah. How many Panthers jerseys do you see on a regular basis? You go to Buffalo Wild Wings in Waco, where there are fans of, you know, every team everywhere. You ever see any Panthers jerseys?
You might see like a Cam Newton.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in Charlotte right now. I haven't seen a Panthers jersey once. No. I haven't heard any talk about the Panthers. Nothing. It's yeah. What's kind of funny about, from my standpoint of picking the NFL one, is the Patriots are pretty close right now.
Oh, right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think you do have to take some account of, like, they did win 6 Super Bowls the last 25 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's tough for me to
they
just
didn't
say
even
how
come to mind, Patriots.
Right, because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, their situation is
not
almost
great.
as bad as Carolina's. It's pretty bad. But so that was my pick, was Carolina as well. But we're not gonna double up. So I'm gonna go with my next closest team, which the first one that came to mind, which as it would for like long term most pathetic, would be the Jets, but you can't say that right now. The Jets could mess around and win that division. They could. So my pick is going to be of the old guard of the NFL, and that is the Chicago Bears.
Okay.
Not good. Not good.
Have not
Now,
been good in about 40 years.
It's been
Well,
a
they made
long
the-
time.
they
I actually
made the Super Bowl a couple times. But
I watched them make a Super Bowl break.
yeah.
I did. And what's funny to me about the Bears is it feels like the game of football passed them by like 15 years ago, and they just never recovered. Like they have never had a great quarterback in their history.
True.
The best quarterback in Bears history is Jay Cutler. Like that's pathetic. And they're really high on Caleb Williams, of course. Who wouldn't be, right? Number 1 pick, great talent. But they also felt very similarly about Justin Fields, and that was not that long ago.
I've
That
got
was
something to
3
say
years ago.
about Caleb Williams. Like, I think he's a fine quarterback. When I saw him play here live, and he got smoked by that Baylor defensive line. But one thing that bothers me,
It was like the worst game of his career, yeah.
one thing that bothers me is that some Bears fans thinks that he coined the bear claw. And I'm like, that's not.
I love that.
That's not what he just saw it in Waco. I was like, ooh.
He literally saw it like 1,000 times in that game that he sucked.
Yeah.
And he starts doing that now.
And like, if you go through the comment section of some posts, like, it's like, ooh, I love that Caleb came up with this. If you scroll enough, eventually you'll see, hey, that's our thing.
He really didn't. He really didn't come up with that.
No.
Like somebody's gonna play for the Texans at some point, Braden, and they're gonna do one of these.
Yeah.
And they're gonna be like, oh my God. I guess it can't really happen in Houston, right? But
Well, no, because it's an
did
H.
you just come up with
You
that?
could say it's an H.
Yeah, don't they do that for the H?
Yeah, yeah,
Isn't
yeah.
that typically what they do? Yeah.
Mhm.
But I'm thinking like someone who has that kind of logo will start to do that, and they'll be like, whoa, who came up with that? Caleb Williams, I think I get annoyed by the people who are like, oh, he paints his fingernails. He can't lead an NFL team. But
Same with Jared
I
McCain.
do. Yeah. Like it's 2024, man. Like
Mhm.
who gives a shit? I mean, they said the same thing about Cam Newton with the
Right.
hairstyle
With
and the
Westbrook.
clothes that he wore. There was a guy I worked with who's a big football nut, and he was like, you can't rally around a guy that dresses like that. I'm like, why not?
Yeah.
Who gives a shit? Like literally, who gives a shit? But what I do fall in with Caleb Williams is I'm a little concerned that he has been coddled for so long. Like he was Lincoln Riley's baby. And when he got to OU, it like Spencer Rattler stunk and he puts Caleb in, and Caleb's pretty great right away. And no OU fan would say anything bad about him or his performance even after that Baylor game. And then he goes to USC. It's the same thing. He follows his coach who is his guy, and nothing is ever wrong with Caleb Williams. And he has never won a big game in his college career. He didn't beat Baylor, which was the biggest game of the year for them at that point at OU.
Caleb's also one of the reasons why you could argue that we made the Big 12 championship game. He got sacked on the last play of Bedlam. Remember that?
Yes, which was huge. So he didn't beat Oklahoma State. He didn't beat Oregon when he was at USC.
Mhm.
He didn't beat Utah when he was at USC.
He
And
almost
he
lost to
cried at
Arizona or State, I think, or something last year in overtime.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. And he cried after every loss,
Mhm.
which, like, you lose a big game in college and you cry. Like, I actually think that's a good thing. That shows that you're leaving a lot out there. But by the time you're losing like your 4th game, like
Yeah.
enough. Throw your helmet down, but like enough with the crying into your mother's arms in the stands when you guys go 8-4.
Yeah.
And then he's like hand selecting which teams shouldn't pick him, which I know a lot of big time draft picks do now. But that part concerns me, is that he's never won a big game and he's been coddled his whole time as a college athlete. So
Speaking of crying quarterbacks, I saw a TikTok edit recently of Max Duggan talking about, if only things had gone right for Max Duggan. I was like, screw Max Duggan.
boo-hoo.
I don't care about Max Duggan. Boo-hoo.
boo,
Try
freaking
winning a
who.
Big 12 championship game, loser.
Yeah, Brad, you tell him, man. Shit, yeah. So I think the Bears are pathetic.
I would agree.
They have not had a quarterback, and the game that passed them by, like they went to the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman, which I think you can circle as the last time a team could make the Super Bowl with a quarterback that bad. Like the game has just evolved too much at that position that you can't do that anymore. And so they have won one playoff game in like 15 years. And outside of the excitement for Caleb Williams, there's no one else on that team. They've had they've had a worse receiving core arguably than the Patriots the last couple of years, which is really bad. Like really bad. So my pick goes to the Bears. All right, which league are we going with next?
Let's go with the NBA.
NBA. Braden, who do you have? Most pathetic right now.
I'm gonna go with the Wizards.
Oh, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, you could go with the Pistons because they had the
You
record-breaking streak.
But the Wizards with the branding in there too, that's a good pick.
Yeah, I think people were expecting them to be bad, and they've been bad for quite a while. As long as I can, maybe not as long as I can remember, but ever since they lost John Wall, they've kind of
Yeah, I mean, since I've been watching basketball, they've had like two good teams.
Mm-hmm.
One pretty good team. In 2017, they lost the Celtics, and they really probably shouldn't have. That had John Wall,
Bradley Beal,
and Brad Beal. Yeah, they were pretty good. But yeah, they don't have a lot going for them right now when you're giving Kyle Kuzma that kind of money.
Yeah, Kyle Kuzma, Jordan Poole. So
That's
that's your 1-2.
Jordan Poole.
That's your 1-2.
And they
That's
just like
bad.
give them money because like we have to give somebody money.
Yeah.
Free agent splash. Good Lord. Terrible identity. Like it's a bad name. It's a bad team name. Nobody cares. DC is really not a great sports town anyway.
True.
At all. And the Wizards. So much of this, so many of our picks can come back to like, how many Wizards fans do you know? You know,
Yeah.
the Bears one is different. Obviously, Chicago's a great sports town.
Right.
But like the Wizards, that's the game with the cheapest tickets on your schedule, right?
Yeah.
The Wizards.
Any
Good
Wizards?
Lord.
I don't know if I really even saw any Wizards jerseys when I've been in DC.
Probably not. Who's the best Wizard of all time?
Elton Brand.
It's fucking Harry Potter, dude. I mean, John Wall. I mean, the best player ever did play for the Wizards, which is embarrassing, but I wouldn't call him the best Wizard ever.
76er. My bad.
If you do Baltimore Bullets, you can throw in Wes Unseld. But you're
Gilbert.
really slim pickings there. Gilbert Arenas was the one when I was growing up. That's really slim pickings, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better anytime soon for the Wizards.
Yeah, not a bright future for them.
That's why the NBA might be the toughest one to pick, because it's some of these teams are so fucking bleak, and
Yeah.
and I don't think the Wizards have any interest in winning anytime soon. Any interest. Neither does my pick, which we have our first city to be on the list twice of this, just the fourth selection. It is once again the city I'm in right now. I am picking the Charlotte Hornets as my NBA pick. And again, this is cheating a little bit because like the Pistons are definitely up there. They've had some great days.
Yeah.
The Hornets have not. And you put in the fact that they haven't been able to get branding right. Okay. They were the Bobcats for years, as the behind the power chair in our studio will show you. Pete Souza, former Charlotte Bobcat, so to speak. That stunk. They stunk as the Bobcats. It is a great basketball state that couldn't give less of a shit about their NBA team. They're terrible right now. They're really trying with this LaMelo thing, and he's just like
Keeps getting hurt.
yeah, and I do feel for him there. He's also a 22-year-old who's like 14. He drives his go-kart around his
Yeah.
rooftop in his Charlotte apartment. Like, it's just none of it's good. It's probably the deadest arena in the league. And it really doesn't have that much of an outlook for the future. Like, LaMelo is good. Brandon Miller had a nice year for a guy they didn't want to draft at number 2. At least the fans didn't. But there's no playoff success whatsoever from that franchise. And they were run by the greatest player ever. And just gave him the keys and he couldn't run a team. He brought in his protege, Kwame. That didn't work. It's funny how our 2 NBA picks both had Michael Jordan as part of it. In Jason, he had Kwame with the Wizards with him and did nothing with the Charlotte franchise that went back to the name that they had originally to hope to bring some fan excitement around it. Didn't do it. They're going to win 14 games this year. I'm putting it at maybe 17 if LaMelo's a little bit more healthy than he usually is.
Wow.
But
a whole 3 wins.
a 3-win swing for one player in the NBA is kind of a lot, though. So maybe that brings him to 15. Like, they are terrible. I couldn't name a single player on the team the last 5 years outside of those 2 guys, let alone this year. No idea who plays for the Charlotte Hornets. If the cheapest tickets on your schedule aren't when you're facing the Wizards, it has to be when you're facing the Hornets. I mean, good Lord, man. That's pretty bad. All right, you got between MLB and NHL. Which one do you want to go with next?
I'll go with the MLB.
Okay, the Major League Baseball. Let's do it.
The Major League. There's a lot of options for MLB, I think.
Yeah. There's one that's almost unfair in how obvious it is.
I'm going to go with
options.
To me, there's 2 that stand out. I'm going to go with the Chicago White Sox.
Okay. All right. You went with the other one that I had between my 2. All right. The White Sox.
And I decided this based off the current standings.
That's a good call.
Because the Athletics, they've won almost 20 more games than the White Sox currently. The White Sox are 27-83.
That's insane.
And
by the way, we
July.
are recording this on July 31st. They went from the All-Star break to the trade deadline without winning a single fucking game. They have not won a single game since the All-Star break, Braden.
Yeah,
that's insane.
That's crazy.
That's almost, and the word I come to with the White Sox is impossible. They are like impossibly bad. It should not be possible how freaking bad this team is.
It's embarrassing
Horrible.
For the city.
And it wasn't that long ago.
Also,
it was 3 years ago when they were playing your Astros in the postseason as division winners.
Yes. This is also our second repeat city.
Yes. Shout out to you, Chicago, which has 2 last-place teams in Major League Baseball, the only city to have that. Congrats again. But one comfortably worse than the other.
Yeah.
That is, good Lord. They are so bad. And what's funny about it, too, is they have not, this is a bold statement, they weren't even like completely mismanaged. And what I mean by that is when you look at that 2021 team that won the Central and went to the playoffs, those were a lot of homegrown guys. Tim Anderson and Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert and Jose Abreu. They had a lot of them. I think Giolito was too. And they just all sucked. They all sucked. They all fell off a cliff or got hurt or both. Like, you look at them now, Tim Anderson is a complete waste.
Yep.
My guy, Andrew Vaughn, who I covered in the Cape League, number 3 pick in the draft, can't hit. Robert, they just traded. Abreu walked and then became the worst hitter in the history of baseball with the Astros. Yeah. They signed Andrew Benintendi to their biggest deal ever, their biggest free agent deal for Andrew Benintendi. 5 years and less than 100 million. He's fucking terrible.
Yeah.
Like, they're all so bad. They just traded at least one of those pitchers yesterday. They had 2 starters who accounted for, I think, 15 of their 27 wins. That's unthinkable. They're so bad. And where it comes to patheticness is when you think of Chicago, Braden, what baseball team do you think of?
The Cubs.
10 out of 10 baseball fans outside of Chicago hear that town and they think the Cubs.
Oh, one thing else that adds to their patheticness was Tim Anderson getting clocked by Jose Ramirez.
That might have been where it all went wrong.
Maybe. Or it could have been when Tim
Yeah,
Anderson hit the walk-off in the Field of Dreams game. Not the walk-off, but the home run into
was
the
it a
corner.
walk-off or a game winner in the top of the ninth or
Yeah.
something? Yeah, that could have been it. That could have been it. And they just never got a nice thing again. So pathetic, in fact, that when the Cubs made the World Series in 2016, do you remember that ESPN graphic that was like, it's the first World Series game in Chicago in 71 years? Like, the last time there was a World Series game in Chicago, whatever, Franklin Roosevelt was president, this, that, the other. And it was like, they played 2 of them there in 2005.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Like,
It was like
what's
10 years before.
And again, putting the historic factor into it just a little bit. What's so funny is that 05 White Sox team is like one of the best teams of this century. It doesn't get remembered as such, but they were pretty dominant. They lost 1 game the whole postseason, and they swept the defending champs, the Red Sox. They swept the World Series and lost a game to the Angels in between in the ALCS. And in that ALCS, they did something that will never be done again. Their bullpen pitched 1 inning in 5 games. Wow. That, like, the team they won like 100 games. They were really good, and they like completely sold their soul for that. And they really thought they had something a few years ago. I thought they had something a few years ago. But they are impossibly bad. They're going to lose 120 games easily.
Yeah.
They might lose 130 games. Like, that's not out of the question. They haven't even won 30 games yet. Good Lord, man. So that was obviously one of the 2 I had in mind. The other is going to be Oakland. I'm going to pick Oakland. I'm going to take the slam dunk. The alley-oop is like on the rim and I'm just tapping it in. That which is illegal, but I'm picking the A's, who are better than the White Sox and had a decent start to the year. They're 20 wins better, but still could lose 100 games this year.
Right.
They are just unfortunate, I think is the best word for it. I think they actually do have some good baseball fans out there in Oakland. But with what's been happening the last 10 years, I can't blame them for not going and supporting the team at that disgusting ballpark. I do want to see a game there at some point. I know it's gonna be done. I don't think they're ever gonna move back into it. But I kind of want that experience of going to a game in San Francisco, which is like one of the most beautiful ballparks in baseball, and then the next night going to Oakland. That shithole in Oakland, because this is why it's like the same reason we love watching bad movies. Like, I want to be there for that train wreck. But yeah, I mean, there's the story. Like, they're going to be playing in a minor league ballpark next year. They're going to move to Vegas, and maybe they'll care there. But the ownership team just has zero interest in winning. They use the poor excuse that not even the Pirates are using anymore. Like, we're done with the excuse. Like, Tampa's just as poor, and they made the World Series a few years ago. Yeah. They are perennially a team that contends in their division. They won 100 games in 2021. Like, don't give me that shit. Like, I'm sick of that. So yeah, it's Oakland for me. NHL. This is interesting because, Braden, you don't watch a ton of NHL. Growing up in Houston, can't blame you. So I thought this could be even more intriguing. Like, going with your natural instincts could lead us to an actually really pathetic team.
Okay.
And I know you've done your research, you've done your homework on this one.
My gut is telling me, and I think this team made the Stanley Cup Finals maybe like a decade ago,
Okay.
and I haven't heard
Alright.
about them since. The San
Oh,
Jose
okay.
Sharks, they're pretty bad.
Yeah. They're pretty bad. Yeah, they were the worst team in the league this year, I believe. Yeah, they're horrible. They did make the Stanley Cup final in 2016. Yeah.
Who'd they play?
Pittsburgh.
Ah.
Pittsburgh beat them.
Yep.
No Stanley Cups. A couple of Hall of Famers, but they haven't had a player that the casual NHL fan would recognize in 3 or 4 years now. Like we're talking really bottom of the barrel stuff, San Jose Sharks. And they actually had like a decent run in terms of like they made the playoffs every year with Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau and Joe Pavelski, and like they had a decent fan support for Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, that's as dead as it comes right now. Like if they didn't have a nice enough arena, they might be talking about moving that franchise because they just got nothing. No juice behind it. No rebrand, no players, no hope. They did have the number 1 pick in the draft, picked Macklin Celebrini of Boston University, so things might be looking up in that sense. But oof, yeah, I think they were comfortably the worst team in the league. That's a good. See, you went with your gut, Braden, and that was a good pick.
Yeah, thank you.
The hockey fan of the show approves of that pick. I'm gonna take behind the curtain because I don't think this is part of when we were rolling. But our producer Zach told us, "Hey, as long as you don't take a random shot at my team, I'm okay." And I said, "Well, it doesn't have to be random because this is not random. This is calculated." But since you picked the Sharks, my pick is the Ottawa Senators, Zach's favorite team.
You're not a Stars fan? Oh,
he's not a Stars fan. No. I don't know. We'll have to get his story sometime on why he picked Ottawa. But they are really, really bad. They've been in a rebuild for years now. My other pick was going to be the Buffalo Sabres, but I think they're in a little bit better of a position right now than the Senators are. The Sabres have not made the playoffs since 2010, which is like, again, almost impossible when half the teams in the league make the playoffs. But things are looking up just a little bit for them. In Ottawa, they are in like year 8 of a rebuild since making the conference finals, improbably in 2017. They don't have much going for them again in terms of like players that you recognize.
Oh, wait.
You think, oh, their captain is Brady Tkachuk. I know his dad and I know his brother. Or, they just got Linus Ullmark, who was the Vezina Trophy winner from 2 years ago. But last year he lost his starting job. Oh, okay. They are very comfortably the second most well-supported team in their own province of Canada. Obviously, Toronto is there, and even closer to them than Toronto is the most historic franchise in the entire league, the team with the most Stanley Cups, the Montreal Canadiens. So that's right over the river in Quebec. So it's a very niche thing in Ottawa, even though it's the capital of Canada, that they are not the most popular team by far. They did a nice little rebrand a few years ago, but there's not a lot of history there in terms of this iteration of the Senators, and they have not been good for a good while, and they don't even have the upside that the Buffalo Sabres have right now, and that is a damning statement.
I will say that they, according to Hockey Reference, they made the Stanley Cup final in 2007.
Correct. Lost to Anaheim.
Their coach was B. Murray, so
yes.
That's what I know about them now.
Big time. Braden, now the Senators fan.
And he was fired the next year, so.
Yeah, that's too bad. That was kind of a, I don't want to say miracle run for them. They had a good team, but if you look, it's kind of a flash in the pan that they got there. Beat Buffalo in the conference final. How about that? So maybe you should become a Senators fan with Zach.
I think if I pick a hockey team, it's not going to be the Senators.
That would be fun, but bleak. That is our bleak Mount Rushmore, so to speak. We just one team from each league, my representatives. So for me, that would be what did we say? The Bears, the Hornets, the A's, and the Senators. And Braden, yours would be
The Panthers, the Wizards, the White Sox, and the San Jose Sharks.
well, yours I think is even worse. You did good first pick. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Anyway, that's gonna do it for our bleak Mount Rushmore. He's Braden Murray. I'm Cam Stewart. We'll have some more tomorrow. We'll have something tomorrow, Braden, won't we?
Probably. It's up to you.
Yeah,
really.
we'll have a show tomorrow. How about it? That is the Cam Show, powered by Rogue Media Sports Network. Thank you.
We are Rogue Media Sports.